You know that feeling when you're deep down a late-night internet rabbit hole and suddenly you're hit with this very real sense of existential dread? Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're taking a structured journey to unpack 7 frankly terrifying modern theories that are blowing up online right now. In this explainer, we're going to impartially break down the source material from a recent viral deep dive, looking at exactly why these concepts are so deeply unsettling to us. By mapping out the data, the wild anecdotes, and even some historical callbacks, we can really start to understand the psychology behind our modern fears. Let's get into it.
So here's our roadmap for today. We've grouped these theories into 4 main categories. First, signs, dreams, and shadows. Then, bizarre pop culture coincidences. Third, technology and secret surveillance. And finally, hidden messages in media.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Signs, Dreams, and Shadows. So the source material poses this really haunting question. Are your dreams just, manifestations of daily anxiety, or are they actually prophecies, or even windows into parallel universes? Proponents of this theory suggest that when we dream, we might literally be seeing alternate versions of ourselves living out other timelines. And the crazy thing is, this isn't just some new internet trend. This concept traces all the way back to ancient Egypt. People actually built these massive sleep incubation temples because they firmly believed higher powers were speaking to them directly through their dreams.
And if you want to know why this idea freaks people out so much, just listen to this famous anecdote about the actor Mark Ruffalo. Get this. Back in 2001, Ruffalo reportedly had this surreal, incredibly vivid dream that basically screamed at him to go see a doctor about a tumor behind his left ear. He literally acted on that profound sense of unease, got examined, and they actually found a real brain tumor. Thankfully, it was benign, but still, it's stories exactly like this that completely fuel the modern paranoia that our nightmares might actually be literal warnings.
Moving from the subconscious to the waking world, the source explores this widely reported and frankly terrifying phenomenon of shadow figures. Witnesses all over the globe describe these entities as featureless, dark, humanoid silhouettes, a lot of times wearing a hat or a cloak. And the freaky part, they're rarely seen moving directly toward a person or speaking. Usually, they just appear right out of the corner of your eye. The whole conspiracy here frames these figures as grim omens, basically premonitions that something terrible is about to go down.
Now, the real terror of this theory, it's all about the timeline. There's this deeply unsettling pattern where multiple witnesses claim to see these dark figures exactly 3 days before a catastrophic tragedy. 3 days. To really drive this home, the explainer details one chilling anecdote about a family who allegedly saw a dark figure standing at the foot of their bed every single night for a week right before their child disappeared. Now, whether you chalk it up to superstition or something way darker, the sheer cultural consistency of this nightmare is honestly impossible to ignore.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, Bizarre Pop Culture Coincidences.
The internet absolutely loves finding patterns in chaos. They've even gone so far as to map major historical events to the pregnancy timeline of the influencer Trisha Paytas. Yeah, really. The theory basically suggests her babies are actually reincarnated world leaders because of these eerily aligned birth dates. For example, right around the time Queen Elizabeth passed away, Paytas reportedly went into labor, which led to the internet completely exploding with claims that her baby, Malibu Barbie, is the reincarnated queen. And then, the exact same pattern popped up when the Pope passed away, right around the birth announcement of her baby Aquaman. It's such a bizarre phenomenon, especially when you see how people just straight up ignore logical timeline discrepancies to make it fit, like when they try to include Ozzy Osbourne in the theory before he was officially announced to have passed and way after the baby was actually born.
Building on all that strange pop culture anxiety, we've got the WTF 2025 calendar theory. Basically, the internet collectively realized that the first 3 days of January 2025 literally spell out WTF, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, on the surface, sure, it's just a harmless quirk of the calendar. But given the context of the last few years, the internet has given this a much darker spin. And here is exactly why this is causing such widespread déjà vu and existential dread. The last time a year started with this exact Wednesday, Thursday, Friday progression was, you guessed it, the dreaded year of 2020. Because of how that particular year unfolded globally, seeing that identical calendar start has sparked this intense, superstitious panic online about what 2025 might actually hold in store for us.
Which brings us to Section 3, Technology and Secret Surveillance.
Guys, the data here is staggering. By 2025, 40% of young adults will actually rely on platforms like TikTok as their primary news source. 40%. This really sets the stage for a massive modern anxiety. I mean, nearly half of an entire generation is relying on a completely unregulated algorithm for their view of the world. And that totally opens the door to this pervasive theory that users are being secretly and systematically radicalized without even knowing it.
The core argument from the source is that these platforms are basically acting as one massive unregulated social experiment. Think about it. It's incredibly easy to manipulate human behavior and brain chemistry through rapid dopamine hits from quick, punchy videos. This leads to people blindly copying celebrity trends, like, say, ordering a very specific takeout meal just because an influencer did it. It also makes users super vulnerable to targeted fear-mongering. The source specifically calls out the astrology community on these apps for driving users into absolute panics over, well, nothing.
And this all builds into an even deeper surveillance fear. Now, we've all heard the theory that our phones are listening to our conversations to serve us targeted ads, right? But there's this incredibly unsettling modern folklore that goes a massive step further. Users are actively reporting that they merely thought about a product in their head, didn't search for it, didn't say a single word out loud, and boom, they subsequently received an advertisement for it. It brings up this really chilling question. Has our technology advanced past simple audio recording into something far more invasive?
To anchor all this intense paranoia in documented reality, the source points to a $95 million Apple class action lawsuit. That's a lot of zeros. Settled in January of 2025, this massive payout went to users who claimed the Siri assistant was activating without warning and secretly recording highly sensitive private moments. We're talking about allegedly capturing everything from private medical conversations to literal sex therapy sessions. When you hear stuff like that, it's pretty easy to see why we're all so rightfully terrified of the little glass rectangles we carry everywhere.
All right, on to our final category, Section 4, Hidden Messages in Media.
For this final section, we're looking backward at the media we all enthusiastically consumed as kids and unpacking some incredibly dark revelations about Hollywood. The explainer highlights specific, highly inappropriate adult jokes that were subliminally hidden within beloved kids' films and television shows, pointing pretty heavily at the Nickelodeon era of the early 2000s. We're talking about inexplicable swinging scenes in movies like The Grinch, a really inappropriate delivery room joke where a newborn is compared to a boss, and a highly disturbing visual candy gag written for child actor Jamie Lynn Spears. And while we might have just dismissed these as edgy jokes when we were teens, realizing they were deliberately included in children's programming is a gross boundary violation and honestly deeply alarming.
Which brings us to the core of this terrible reality. The source really questions the psychological motivation behind certain industry leaders, specifically naming figures like Dan Schneider. The theory is that it was incredibly dark. These creators were actively pushing boundaries, not for the sake of comedy, but as this disturbing power play. They wanted to see exactly what kind of predatory content they could get away with broadcasting to millions of minors right out in the open.
And this tracks a truly dark pipeline. The logic basically flows like this. First, publicly hiding inappropriate sexual humor in kids' media. Then, normalizing that toxic, boundary-pushing environment on set. And ultimately, concealing horrific systemic abuse behind closed doors. When you look at the tragic reality of child exploitation in the industry, it really forces us to ask a sickening question. If this is what they were perfectly fine showing publicly, what on earth were they doing behind closed doors?
So, stepping back from all of this, a very clear pattern emerges from these 7 theories. Whether we're talking about the ancient fear of a shadowy premonition, the very modern dread of an algorithmic wiretap, or the disturbing realization that our childhood media was completely compromised, these conspiracies all stem from the exact same place. They come from a deep, fundamental human anxiety about completely losing control of our reality and our surroundings.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final thought. After looking at all the evidence, the wild anecdotes, and the hard data, which of these concepts has successfully hacked into your own existential dread? Seriously, which of these terrifying theories do you secretly find yourself believing? Keep questioning what you see out there, and we'll catch you next time.